Good evening. I'm Zerlina Smith, and I'm here today with our guest, Mothers Who Care guest, Lorraine Chavez. And we're doing our family focus CAN TV show, and we're going to talk about the hope and what, Lorraine?
We're going to talk about the hope and the promise of Chi-Town.
Oh, Chi-Town.
Coming from Chi-Town.
From Chi-Town. Look, I'm a woman from the West Side. She said Chi-Town. So that's the Step in the Name of Love movement.
Yes.
So what's going on with you? Introduce yourself. Give us a little story about who you are, because my viewers, if you don't know, I'm Zerlina Smith. I am a community advocate. I am an activist. I'm a resident of the Austin community on the West Side of Chicago. I am a single parent, and I am a homeowner, a stakeholder in the city of Chicago. So let our guest tell you something about her, and let's move this forward and let's get to some serious debates.
Well, my name is Lorraine Chavez, and I'm an educator, a policy analyst, and a community advocate in Chicago. I'm born and raised in Chicago. I'm a single mom as well of two college grads, and I've born and raised in Chicago, but I've left Chicago and come back, and I've been back for quite a few years. I too am a homeowner, and we've gone through quite a bit of struggle in Chicago, and I'm happy to be here to talk about it and to talk about what kind of hope I see actually for the city.
Okay, so as she just stated, the struggles in Chicago. So now I have to get to this haunting question. Jason Van Dyke.
Well, the city has been convulsed, honestly, since finding out that this young man was murdered by the police, and then basically the city council and the mayor and most of the people in the city council who were there at the time made a huge payout of millions of dollars to the family. And it took us until after the election of the current mayor to find out that this had transpired. And so the city has been in really crisis mode since finding out that this man was murdered by Jason Van Dyke, and they want justice for that. And there was a positive court decision, as everybody in Chicago knows, and probably the nation, so Jason Van Dyke, the policeman who killed him, was convicted. And there is some justice now for some justice for Laquan and his family.
Do you honestly think that was justice for Laquan?
Certainly, it's better than nothing. And in the entire history of Chicago, no policeman has actually been found indicted for murder of a black man.
Just excessive force.
Right. And this is the first time. There was a white young man, I think about 70 years ago, and the police were prosecuted for his murder. So on that score, it is a historic victory. It does not bring Laquan back or any of the young black and brown young men primarily, but also women who have been unjustly murdered. And so that is a very, very, it's a, how do you say, it's a bittersweet victory.
When we talk about the Jason Van Dyke trial, we're going to talk about multiple issues or multiple just things that are going on around the city of Chicago. With the Jason Van Dyke trial, the state of Illinois has a RICO case, right? Well, not RICO case, RICO law. With this RICO law, if you foresee something to happen, then you are a part of the problem and not a part of the solution. So you're just as guilty as the person that actually does the act, right? So I've been talking to a lot of my good friends, mutual friends, and I won't say anybody's name. How come the same people that were part of the cover-up has not been found under the RICO law guilty or held accountable for their actions. And this is just a question because this is a conversation that I've had since the verdict has came out. If the mayor knew about the cover-up, he should be a part of this trial. He should have some accountability to someone. If the alderman, whether it was one or two, knew of this and they signed off on it, and these things are all over social media, what are the consequences for them because they were a part of the cover-up? And with the RICO law, it states that they're just as guilty as Jason Van Dyke. So what do you think about that? Because I know you've heard these conversations coming about.
Absolutely. And we have two, I think, overarching questions after this trial. First of all, what is the actual punishment going to be? Because there is a whole range of charges that he could be charged on. That's one issue. So the minimum jail time would be, I believe, 6 years. So there's a lot of concern because the charges and how the charges against Jason Van Dyke are meted out is still up in the air. So the sentencing,
which is kind of concerning because you have a young African American male, and trust me, it doesn't matter what color you are. When you commit a crime, I'm a strong believer. When you commit a crime, you should do the time.
Right.
So it does not matter about color, financial equality. It just matters about you committing the crime. Hadia Pendleton, the young girl who was shot on the south side of Chicago by an African American male, is looking at life in prison.
Right.
Okay? Now, I don't see any justice there. That's just from Zerlina's perspective. I don't see any justice in the laws when our laws were not designed for us. They're designed to work against us. So we had so many people when the verdict came out about the Jason Van Dyke. You had all these agencies, all the police in riot gear. They thought that they were going to tear up the west and the south sides in these neighborhoods. I'm like, what do they have to tear up? You know, the elected officials were sending out massive emails, phone calls. They were making this to be something that it wasn't. We as people have really forgotten that if we don't, and we're going live as well on our cell phones, we as people have forgotten that when it comes to laws and what goes on with our laws, is this something that is really working for our benefit when it comes to community, culture? Is it something that's working for us? And when you think about Hadia Pendleton, please Google it. He's about to go on trial and might be sentenced to life. And Jason Van Dyke might get 3 years. I mean, do you think that's any justice?
6 years.
I mean, and they both did the same crime.
Right.
They both did the same crime.
Exactly.
But one here and one there. And what does that look like? What does that look like? That conversation is just my thoughts. But when you think about everything when it comes to inequality and most communities of color.
Yeah.
You have to think about minimum wages. Let's move on past that. Minimum wages. What does it look like since we've been on the forefront of the fight for 15? Where are we at with that right now?
Well, as you know, Zerlina, because you and I were there at the very beginning of the Fight for 15 movement, which really, the first action for Fight for 15 launched in New York City at the very end of 2012. But the coalition to Fight for 15 officially launched in Chicago as well at the end of 2012, and then really exploded on the national scene from Chicago in 2013. And it's been a long struggle. It's a continuing struggle because it's not over with. And there's an expression in Chicago that we use that nothing stops a bullet like a job. And not only just a job, but a good job. And the Fight for 15 has really reached the national scene, and Jeff Bezos of Amazon is now declaring a $15 an hour minimum wage. And some other cities around the country have also adopted a $15 minimum. But we know from tons of research, especially from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, they have a wage calculator that they've had for quite a few years, and a true minimum wage which would exist similar to the one that was established originally in the U.S. in 1964 or 5 would really have to be $20 an hour. So the minimum wage around $20 to $25 depending on the city, because our costs of living are very, very different now. But still, a minimum of $20 an hour.
So do you think, okay, we're actually, once again, I'm Zerlina Smith. I am the host of Mothers Who Care, which is an entity of Increase the Harvest. I'm a founder of a non-for-profit in 2015. Family Focus is all about Mothers Who Care. Mothers Who Care is just not about moms. It's about a family component. It's about our fathers, our seniors, our children, our teenagers. It's about people. And we're talking about $15 an hour. I live in the Austin community on the west side of Chicago, and there's no jobs in that community. And there's a lack of development for jobs in that community. And when we talk about $15 an hour, just starting off for people who live in poverty, who live in communities that are just untouched.
Yes.
The forgotten parts of our communities. What does that look like? Because I know we started fighting for $15 an hour at the beginning, and we're still fighting for $15 an hour.
Still fighting.
And I'm fighting for economic development across the city in black and brown communities where it's so badly needed.
Yes, so I'm fighting for the same things, Zerlina, and I think it's very clear, and it's unfortunate that you maybe have to be a policy wonk to even know of these organizations, but the research out of Chicago in the last 10 years, especially since the crisis, the recession of 2008, is very, very clear. Chicago is a city that is shrinking in terms of both population and in terms of economic development. So the Metropolitan Planning Council, the Chicago Urban League, a number of organizations have put out a number of reports, and where we see development in Chicago is now exclusively on the north side, close to the lakefront. And lots of organizations have put out maps over time to show that the entire economic development and the entire poverty level have increased all across the entire west side, and going down, if you can kind of visualize the city of Chicago, going down into the south and the west side. So the only area of the city that's prospering right now is the north side, the near south side, meaning just around the loop, just south of the loop, and maybe some areas in the Hyde Park pocket, which is just really a little island there where all of the Obama Foundation money is going to go, and up on the north side. The rest of the city is truly devastated, and what we have is a city that is still highly segregated by race. I live in the Pilsen neighborhood, and we have communities that are, you have your Latino neighborhood, you have your black neighborhoods, you have your white neighborhoods, and never do they meet. And this has absolutely got to change in order for there to be progressive, positive, political empowerment and economic change in the city of Chicago. So what do you think
about the TIF dollars? Because when you go to, because all this information is actually online, you can go to the city of Chicago to look at their economic development plan for the ward which you live in, or the part of the city that you live in. And it will show you how and whom the funds were allocated to and what they were used for. So with that being said, we're going to hope that you go and you research to see how your elected officials is spending your money, representing you. And if you don't know about Tif Funds, can you just tell a little bit about that?
Yes, so tax increment financing was actually a policy that was put in place by Mayor Harold Washington. And the original design of TIF, or tax increment financing, was to bring funds to lesser, to tax businesses so that funds could be used for local economic development in the neighborhoods that desperately needed it, especially those on the south and the west side. And in the Harold Washington years, it's very well documented that he actually distributed funding throughout communities of Chicago in terms of local businesses as well as services through the parks and schools. So that was a brief period in time in which tax increment financing actually benefited the neighborhoods. And now that is not happening at all, and really hasn't been for more than the past 10 years, almost 20 years. So that the TIF monies now have, first of all, there's been a tremendous effort to find out how much exists in the Tif Funds, which basically the mayor has control of, and there's been put some immense political pressure now to open up those funds so that they can be used in a way in which they were originally designed, which is for community economic development, but not for so-called Hyatt hotels. So,
okay, now I can relate to that because I was actually just on the city's website earlier today, whereas I pulled up the TIF trajectory of Austin, and from 2015 to 2019, it shows you, it itemized everything, which is for the small business development, the jobs, the economic, the housing, the sidewalks, for all these things that is needed. Now remember, if you live somewhere in the city of Chicago, and I'm hoping that everyone who watched this show lives in the city of Chicago, and you go on this site, now don't just limit to the city of Chicago, but I love Chicago, right? This is our Chi-Town.
yes.
Go on this site and see if you can find your area that you live in, and then when you have those broken sidewalks, they have alleys, monies to fix alleys. It'll tell you where the alley was fixed, how the money was allocated, and if you see that money sitting there and you know that your alley's messed up, you need to get on the phone to your elected official and make sure that that gets taken care of. And when you look at your community, make sure you are educated on what funds you have, the development that's coming there, because Austin has a commercial district, and I'm trying to figure out, those are the warehouses where I live, and these big spaces that are unoccupied. Where's the willpower to develop the west side of Chicago? And it's not just about the ward that I live in, but the west side of Chicago. So we are here as the Family Focus. We're talking about what has happened and what's going on, because right now what I see going on is nothing around black and brown communities.
No, absolutely.
But then we have a November 6th election coming up. When you talk about the powers that be, the people who we vote to be our advocate for our issues, for our loved ones, what do you plan on doing when November 6th comes? When November 6th comes, I plan on going to vote, but I plan on doing my research on the candidates. When you think about who's going to represent you, do your homework first, because those TIFs, the governor has no control over that. But what does the governor have control over, Lorraine?
Right. Well, first of all, I just want to give the audience a resource that you should look into, which is Civic Labs by Tom Tresser. So he has done, with this organization, this group of community advocates, tons of research on TIFs. And you can go to their site and find out what is actually happening in your particular economic district. So I advise everybody to do that. But first of all, we have to vote. Now, I understand that all candidates might not be everything to all people, but both of the major parties, they count on people not being engaged in the political process, and they count on then being able to get a certain known quantity of their supporters out to vote. We really have to change this calculus, and I do feel that what has happened because of the Laquan McDonald murder, and because of massive community organizing in the depths of the Great Recession, that we in Chicago have a chance to really exert a lot of pressure through our local leadership on the aldermanic level. So 4 years ago, we had the largest number of aldermanic candidates, the city's divided into 50 wards, showing up to participate as candidates and showing up to vote. And we need to continue that momentum, and there's all signs of it in Chicago that that's happening, that local control and local political action is going to be crucial in the years ahead.
So on that note, what do you think about the mayor stepping down? Everyone wants to take credit for the mayor stepping down. It was a city effort of people who were working with other people and other people and other people. It was a collective effort.
Yes.
Not one group can take responsibility for the mayor of Chicago stepping down. It took city residents to put pressure to hold the mayor accountable. The mayor did not step down because of your organization. The mayor did not step down because of your organization. The mayor stepped down because that's what the mayor wanted to do at the time that he thought was best for him in this upcoming re-election cycle, because of the willpower of the people to continue to put pressure on him, not just for Laquan McDonald's murder. Remember the 50 school closings. Remember our allocations or our TIF dollars.
Right.
Remember, it is so many things that we can talk about why the mayor, Rahm Emanuel, has decided no longer to represent the citizens of the city of Chicago.
Right. It seems like a very long struggle, but we have to remember that Chicago working folks have been, black, brown, and white, have been engaged in ongoing, unrelenting struggle. So let's talk about the 50 schools primarily closed in black neighborhoods. Let's talk about the closure of the public mental health clinics at a time when mental health services are desperately needed more than ever before. We have the highest unemployment rates in the entire country. So the employment rate looks and sounds very good, but you have to really dig into the details and look at the labor force participation rates. And Chicago, in terms of labor force participation rates, is ranked out of the top 20 largest cities in the country, is ranked at the bottom. The Great Cities Institute has done fantastic research showing that the massive unemployment rates amongst young black and brown youth ranges as high as 80%. These are really untenable conditions, and that there is no other large city in the entire country that is facing this myriad of crises. And it is another reason that we have the highest out-migration. So people are voting with their feet and they're leaving the city. And the largest category is the black middle class. Because first of all, you got to have money to be able to move, right? If you're unemployed, it's hard to get the money to rent a van and to go.
Get out.
So we are in a profound crisis in the city of Chicago, and certainly the current mayor and his team was well aware of all of these challenges and their complete inability to successfully deal with them.
Okay. So when she say complete inability, once again, let's think about this. Everything that happens to us, we allow to happen. When you think about the black and brown communities, look at how long you've had your congressman who looks like you, but might be out of touch with you. Think about your state reps. Think about your senators, U.S. and state. Think about your, committeemen, who sometimes might be your aldermen. And most of them are your aldermen. That's an elected position, and we vote our aldermen to have that position as well. And that position has a lot of power to it. So make sure when you think about using that voting power that we start educating ourselves better. We need to no longer vote for the seasoned career politicians, or listen to them when they put forth another candidate. Why I say that? Because 9 out of 10, that candidate that they're putting forth is going to come in on their agenda, and if they haven't been doing nothing for the past 20, 30 years of representing your community, why do you think that they're the best representation for the new generation in your community still in 2018?
Yes.
You want to talk about the seasoned politicians? Because we have a lot of them around the state.
Absolutely. Well, what is most concerning, and it goes back to our earlier conversation, and very, very disturbing, is that 47 of the 50 aldermen in Chicago voted for that cash payout to the Laquan McDonald family, knowing that. So they gave the money because Laquan McDonald was unjustly killed. And so that was meant to be a legal settlement with the family. So 47 of the aldermen voted for that. So why aren't there is a lot of discussion in Chicago about responding to the aldermen who did do that vote and saying, look, maybe you should be voted out because you participated in an illegal activity. So this is really quite the dark side of what's going on in Chicago politics, and has been for a long time, but intensely so since the Great Recession. On the plus side, though, on the plus side, though, what we're seeing, as we did 4 years ago with all these new aldermanic candidates and challengers, is we're seeing also another crop and another resurgence of grassroots, independent, progressive, Democratic leadership showing up. So not the established aldermen, because, you know, we need to ask the aldermen, well, what have you done for me lately, right? I mean, do we have the jobs? We need, I mean, it's just laughter in the middle of sorrow.
What have you done for me lately? Okay, now look, and that makes sense. When you walk outside the door, is it the vision that you want to see? Mothers Who Care is a family-focused TV show, and we're only changing our happy-go-lucky narrative because, remember, we normally just have our members that's part of Mothers Who Care on this show. We don't do guests, but we're going to change it up for the simple fact that other people have things that they want to say, and we feel as though our viewers should be there to listen, because this election is coming up. Whether you like JB, whether you like Browner, you need to do your homework. Don't vote for party. Vote for who has your best interest at hand, because we can no longer live in shackles. We can no longer be mentally held hostage inside of our houses, and we have to first make sure that whomever represents us, that they take care of our public schools, that they make sure that our living wages fit the economy, and they take care of our community by not separating the people by dollars. They take care of us across the board. That one vote as an elected official represents 50 wards. Okay, so your alderman don't just represent you, he represents the whole city. So make sure you hold him accountable, because November 6th you're gonna have a new governor, you're gonna have state reps, you're gonna have judges, you're gonna have a lot of people. Do your homework, do your research, because we can no longer across the state of Illinois continue to live like this. When you see commercials that are running by billionaires on a daily basis, how many people can say that they cannot get a small business loan? How many people can say that there's no economic willpower in their community? You don't see them until it's time to vote. So they need you. Let's hold our elected officials accountable. And I'm going to let Lorraine say something, and then we're going to call it an evening.
I second Zerlina. I understand we're all stressed. I understand we're stressed by jobs, by trying to just survive in this economy. But please do whatever you can to participate in elections, to educate yourself, and please get out and vote. Some of the politicians who have most power over us are counting on the fact that we do not vote. So this is a democracy still, and we need to exercise our right to vote and lift up your local candidates and your independent grassroots leaders.
Now see, how easy is that? Because don't remember our faces, remember our names. I'm Zerlina Smith, this is Lorraine Chavez. We are community advocates. We are out here with that hope and that dream of building that beloved community. We can no longer worry about the violence in the city of Chicago without the city of Chicago creating sustainability, which is jobs, economic development in these high-impoverished areas. We have to sit back and really look at ourselves and say, if we continue to do the same thing and we see nothing, is it working for us? Look at your voting power as the relationship that you might want to get out of, or you might want to be in. Analyze those factors and vote, because when we go to these voting booths come November 6th, I don't know how do we stomach with the commercials that have been out on both candidates, and with the money that's put out here, and who it's been given to. So on that note, I'm Zerlina Smith. I'm your host, and I love you. And make sure, love one, teach one. Good night.